Well, hello everyone. My name is Jeannie Shop, and I come to you from my company, Pathways Towards Literacy, and I am the editor and a contributing author of the upcoming book, Reading Isn't Optional, Fulfilling the Promise of Literacy for Secondary Students. And I'm spending time with each of the contributing authors, and I am so excited to introduce all of you to the amazing Laura Stewart. So, could you introduce yourself, share what people need to know about you and everything that you've done in your 50 plus years in education and your work?
Yes, yes, indeed. Yes, well, first of all, thanks for having me, Jeannie. I really appreciate it. Yeah, hi, everybody. Yes, as Jeannie said, my name is Laura Stewart. I'm currently the Chief Academic Officer at 95% Group. And for any of you who are unfamiliar with 95% Group, we publish supplemental instructional resources and primarily focused on what we consider the foundational skills of reading and writing and across all tiers of instruction. And in fact, 95% Group, we have kind of this unique literacy ecosystem approach where all of our materials across all tiers of instruction align and support all of our readers. And we also have a wonderful professional learning services, all the way from comprehensive kind of science of reading coursework and training on the use of our materials to what I consider our crown jewel, which is coaching. So that's a little bit about, where I am now. I started out as a teacher. I've had opportunities to work in lots of different fields. And I'm really delighted to kind of be here to really talk about this really important topic, which is adolescent literacy. I think that, when I look back to my origins as a teacher, I have to say, I started out as a middle school teacher
Mhm.
many, many years ago. And as I was sharing with you, I haven't been in education 50 years, but I've been working for 50 years, Jeannie.
Okay.
I worked as a teenager. Let's get that up front.
Don't age
Um,
yourself that much,
yes,
right?
exactly. That's exactly right. But I did start teaching as a middle school many years ago, and I can confirm, just from, personal experience, I did expect kids to come to me already knowing how to read, and I didn't know how to support those kids who didn't know how to read. And what I like to say now, and I know you agree with me, everybody's a reading teacher. And I am really proud to be able to support all teachers in our work here at 95% Group. And I'm also really proud to be contributing to this book to really support all of our teachers and helping all of our students.
So,
I
and
wanted to share
you
with
kick
you.
off the book
Yeah,
with the big
yeah,
chapter at the beginning, and which is so
yes,
critical to ground
yeah.
all of us as leaders and teachers who really want to transform our secondary schools. So, what inspired your focus on your chapter, and why is your chapter? And feel free to share the title of your chapter so critical to literacy transformation.
Yeah, well, I want first of all, I want to say I'm really honored. I want to go back to one other thing though, Jeannie. I want to say I'm really honored that you contributed to a book that I recently published too. I recently published a book called Science of Reading 3.0 through 95% Group, and you did an essay for us on adolescent literacy. So thank you, thank you, thank you for that. And I was really honored to contribute this chapter to your book. And I really wanted to focus on the idea, again, that we're all reading teachers, first of all, and to really help our secondary teachers take a brief look at, first of all, what is the science of reading and how is it helpful to us? And what does the neuroimaging tell us about the nature of the reading brain? Because I think that's always an aha moment for us when we
Mhm.
think about, what needs to happen in the brain for us to acquire this learned skill of reading. I also wanted to introduce our secondary teachers to some of the frameworks that guide our work, like Scarborough's Rope and the Simple View of Reading, and also what are the basic components of reading instruction.
Right.
For example, what is structured literacy? What's the how, the what, the why around structured literacy? And what does that really mean for instruction for beginning readers and also for readers who struggle? But I also wanted to, in this opening chapter, really overview not just the science of reading, but the other sciences that need to be taken in and interwoven and integrated with the science of reading. The sciences of learning and teaching, and also implementation science. because I really wanted teachers to understand that knowing, that there's a body of research called the science of reading, that's not enough. Um, it's not sufficient. It really is the integration and the coherence of all of these different sciences that give us this fuller picture of the what and the how and the when and the why of teaching reading so that all readers can read and so that we can sustain that over time, right? So when I think of science of reading 1.0, that's building the knowledge. Like that's understanding that there is a research base and what are some basic principles of that research. Science of Reading 2.0 is, okay, what does that mean for practice? You know, Science of Reading 2.0 in my mind is how are we translating that research into practice? Science of 3.0 is how are we then changing practice and sustaining that practice over time? And I think what that means for us as educators is we have to understand the science of reading, the science of learning, teaching, and implementation. And all of those have to really be integrated and coherent, right? So the chapter doesn't go deeply into those, but I hope what it does is it inspires and gives our teachers just enough information to understand that we know a lot about how children learn to read. We know a lot about what instruction needs to look like. We know a lot about how things go wrong and what to do when things go wrong. It's a starting point. It lays the groundwork, and how that groundwork is a starting point for that daily practice. I would also say that the chapter, I believe, opens up with the urgency of this in terms of what happens if we don't get it right and, the potential grim life outcomes that could be faced and are statistically likely to be faced with low literacy and illiteracy. And that's why I love, the title of the book because we have, it's not optional. There aren't fallbacks for our students. We have to get this right. And so that was really that was really my hope that the book would open, with those key principles and premises.
You certainly are planting a lot of seeds because, as we know, our knowledge evolves, right? And it's just we keep growing based on what we're learning, and then we plant plenty of seeds. But, to your point, particularly in secondary space, like teachers, have not been trained on how to really support students that have so much unfinished learning. And they want to just say, and I say to them, okay, but if not you, who?
Right.
Who?
Yeah. And
Who?
and and thank you for saying that, first of all, about the science evolving. I want to say that too. Like nothing is nothing's etched in granite. Nothing is, we don't say, oh, the science of reading has arrived, and we have all the answers. We know a lot, but it's
Mhm.
also continuing to evolve.
Mhm.
And I think that's really important to
And
say.
keep growing and maintain our curiosity, right?
Yes.
Because that's where
Right.
we learn, right? So when you
But
think
is but
about
isn't
this,
that what's great about teaching though?
right?
Isn't that what's sustained us in our profession all these years? Because it is a profession of continual inquiry.
Mhm.
And that's one thing that's I think has been really a lovely gift of being in education is
Right.
that it has been a journey. I came up, as a teacher during the height of whole language. And when I think about all the changes that I've had to make in terms of mindset and practice, that has really been humbling
Mhm.
and also humbling, inspiring, but also has emboldened me
Mhm.
to understand the power of leadership, making sure that we have strong leadership to help us move into new frontiers, to continually say we can better ourselves to achieve better outcomes for our students.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Beautiful. So what
yeah.
do you hope is like one, I mean, there's so many going to be so many takeaways, right? From your chapter, but as far as really being a lever of change, like this is
Hmm.
where we have to be, what would you say it would be?
Well, I think that if you were asking me like one big takeaway, I would say, that knowledge is a starting point, right? But it is just that it's a starting point. And so there are key principles that we need to start with. And so what I always like to, tell educators is, we have to understand what's below the surface. Like we have to go what's below the surface of the iceberg as educators because we can, for example, use curriculum resources. I work for a company that publishes curriculum resources. We can use those resources. But if we don't understand the why and what's below that, we can't use those resources with integrity. And by
Right.
integrity, what I mean by that is the focus is always on the student, and we have to be able to use those resources with an eye of understanding what the student needs at any point in time. We also have to be able to use we have to be able to analyze and use data. And we have to be able to understand the process of developing skills as a reader and a writer. So we have to have nuanced understandings that come from a deeper understanding of the knowledge. So the knowledge is the starting point, right? We have to start there. Um, I also want people to understand that, change is not easy. And if we're coming to this from a completely different lens, like I just mentioned, if we're coming to it from a whole language lens or a constructivist lens, let's say, um, it's not going to be easy to unlearn what we have learned in order to give up practices to adopt something new. And that's one reason I wanted to include implementation science,
Mhm.
because implementation science helps us understand, as humans, why it takes years sometimes for us to really move along through phases of change management,
Yeah.
essentially, and why change management is really critical, and why it isn't an individual pursuit. This is a systemic pursuit, right? And part of that systemic change is leadership. And you and I have had that discussion. It's all about leadership, really. And so this isn't a singular pursuit, right?
Right. And
So
I was
those are
gonna,
some of,
yeah.
yeah, go ahead. Go
I was
ahead.
just going to
Yeah,
say a key idea is like integrate, don't isolate. These are all these
yeah,
sciences that got to come together, right?
that's
So,
right.
last question, right? This is a collective, like this is a collection of
Yeah,
incredible leaders and thought leaders in all spaces in education that are coming together with this text. So, what would you want readers to understand about this collective purpose that we
yeah.
have as far as reading isn't optional?
Yeah. I mean, I do think that, I want everybody to know, we're all in this together, right? I mean, we are all in this together. And I want people to understand that. I want people to understand we can move the needle and and our students are counting on us to do so.
Okay.
And it starts with some basic understandings, which hopefully will drive us to examine our practice, which in turn will drive us to adopt those very best practices on a systemic level to ensure that all of our kids can thrive and
Mhm.
flourish as literate citizens, right? Because that's the promise we have to deliver.
Mhm.
I also, I think about, as you mentioned, I've been doing this for a really long time, and I've had opportunities to work myself, as a teacher, as an administrator. I've had the opportunity to work in businesses, both profits and nonprofits, and to be in startups and to work, building teams and to work nationally across the country. And I see that even though those of us that are really close to this, to this, to this work, we sometimes get really myopic in our view. And we think that, oh, the science of reading is everywhere. Everybody knows about the science of reading. But, it just isn't true. I go so many places where they're just starting to learn about the science of reading. I go so many places, Jeannie, and you do too, where the practices that I thought we had given up so long ago are still, you know, very much at play. And the curriculum resources that I thought we had given up are still still have the lion's share of the market, right?
Right.
And so that's the other thing is I want us to remember that there is still work to be done, and we have to do that work collectively. Again, this isn't an individual pursuit. We have to come together as playing whatever role, contributing in the best way that each of us can. Um, so I think your book, is one way in which all of us can, ponder some of these big ideas that we all need to wrap around and collectively come to agreement on in order to think about what's my best contribution? How can I best play to help advance us as a field, into these coherent ideas so that we can impact our students?
Well, thank you so much for saying yes. This book will be can be available for pre-order now on Solution Tree and Amazon. So get your copy, and we're going to
Exciting.
continue this dialogue, this 2026 around adolescent literacy and how we can fulfill our promise. So thank you, Laura. And
My pleasure. I mean,
I'm
Jeannie,
gonna
I'm
I'm gonna
so
stop my recording.
excited.
I know. Okay, so thank you, everyone, and we'll see you hopefully with that book in hand soon. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, everybody.